You've slept, maybe even for a long time. And yet, something inside you remains tired. Not your muscles, not your eyes. It's a deeper tiredness, one that doesn't fade, no matter how much you rest. You stand before the mirror, look at your face. It appears alive. But inside, deep inside, it feels as if something in you has long since lowered its hands. It's as though your innermost self is giving up, but in slow motion. No drama. Just a quiet, steady exhaustion settling like fog over everything you once felt. You still function. You speak. You walk. You work. But it's as if someone else is doing it all, and you're watching through a kind of milky glass, dull and silent. What is this? Where does this tiredness come from? The kind that doesn't heal, not even in silence. Is it just a lack of sleep? Or is it a lack of meaning? Maybe it's a message. We live in a world that barely knows how to pause. The day begins with a sound, not from within, but from the alarm clock. And from there, it continues. With emails, with to-do lists, with expectations that no longer need to be spoken, because they've long been carved into us. You're supposed to be productive, efficient, adaptable, always available, always resilient. And if you're not all of that, something must be wrong with you. But what if the world is unwell? What if your tiredness isn't a dysfunction, but a healthy reaction to a reality that asks too much, too often, too fast? We run inside a rat race that's been sold to us as a ladder to success. And with every step, the noise grows louder. A flood of information, constant stimulation, social comparisons, digital masks. Rarely does anyone ask, how is your soul? The tiredness you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with you. Perhaps it's a sign that you live in a world that too often pulls you away from yourself. Because we've forgotten. We've forgotten how to pause, how to be empty, how to listen instead of perform. And while we function, something precious fades. Our aliveness. There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from doing, but from not knowing why. You can lie in bed all day and still feel utterly drained. Not because you've done too much, but because the why is missing. We are tired because we've lost ourselves in tasks stripped of meaning, in routines with no heartbeat. Albert Camus once said, "A person is more exhausted by a lack of meaning than by effort itself." We can move mountains when we know why we're moving them. But even the smallest step becomes unbearable when it leads nowhere. Many keep working because they carry responsibility for children, for parents, for bills. They keep going, not out of indifference, but because others depend on them. Because walking away isn't always an option. And that's what makes it even harder. You give everything, but feel less and less of yourself. This tiredness you feel may not be a call for sleep, but a call for meaning. Maybe you work dutifully every day, but do you still feel what you're really living for? The deepest kind of exhaustion doesn't come from the body, but from a soul that has long forgotten what once set it on fire. There are days when everything feels flat. You do things, but they no longer touch you. What once stirred your heart now feels distant, as if an invisible wall had slipped between you and the world. You sit at the table with others, and still you feel alone. You speak, but inside all remains silent. This isn't ordinary tiredness. It's a kind of emptiness that no amount of sleep can reach. Camus called it the absurd condition. Man longs for meaning, but the world remains silent. And in that silence, a deeper tiredness begins to grow. You wake up in the morning because the alarm goes off, not because you're looking forward to the day. You go to work because you have to, not because your heart is in it, but because someone depends on you, because life sends bills, but rarely offers space for what's breaking inside you. You keep living, but inside, you stopped moving long ago. It feels as though your life is passing by like a film, and you're just a spectator. This tiredness isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. It is the quiet aftermath of an existence that no longer remembers what it's here for. And maybe, within that very emptiness, lies the first spark of a new question. What would truly move me again? Our world is loud, bright, fast. An endless stream of blinking, scrolling, consuming. Everything is there, instantly, everywhere, all the time. But something is missing, something essential: depth. You're surrounded by images, but none of them stays. You hear voices, but none of them truly speak to you. You laugh, but often it sounds hollow. We live in a time where we see more than ever before, and yet feel less and less. You eat, but you don't taste. You read, but you don't feel. You live, but sometimes only as a shadow of yourself. This tiredness is not the result of effort, but of meaninglessness. The more we distract ourselves, the less we notice that something within us is starving. Not for more information, but for connection. Not for entertainment, but for truth. Because the soul is not nourished by speed. It needs stillness. It needs meaning. It needs something it cannot simply consume, but must answer to. Maybe it's no wonder that so many are tired, in a world that shows us everything but gives us so little. There is a quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from too much, but from not truly living. Heidegger spoke of the inauthentic life, a life not truly led by oneself, but one that unfolds on its own, guided by other people's rules, expectations, and routines never once questioned. You wake up, get dressed, go to work, you function. But somewhere in between, your true self begins to fade. What did you long for as a child? What once set you on fire? When was the last time you did something, not because you had to, but because you wanted to? Many people live for years without ever arriving at themselves. They adapt, they perform roles, and deep within them grows a tiredness that has nothing to do with sleep. It is the tiredness of the unlived. The exhaustion of a heart that has waited far too long for something that never came. And one day, you begin to ask yourself, was that really my life? Was I ever truly myself? Or just the version others needed me to be? There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't simply fade. You can rest, but you won't awaken. Because this tiredness isn't of the body, it's of the soul. Sometimes the soul grows quiet, not because it no longer wants, but because it has been ignored for too long. It retreats gently, almost imperceptibly, until you can barely feel it anymore. And then you sit there, empty, still functioning, but inwardly far from yourself. Maybe this tiredness isn't a problem. Maybe it's a warning. Or more than that, a call. A call to finally turn back to what makes you who you are, to what makes you feel truly alive. But the way back is not through achievement, not through new goals, but through stillness, through the courage to do nothing, and to simply listen for what still lives within you. Maybe this tiredness is not a failure, but the soul's last attempt to be heard. In the depths of exhaustion, there is often a point where something new begins. Not loudly, not triumphantly, but quietly, like the faint heartbeat after a long darkness. Maybe tiredness was never your enemy. Maybe it was your shelter, a cloak that wrapped around you because you weren't yet ready to truly look. Because when you're tired, you can no longer run. And maybe that's exactly what's needed. To stop, to be still, to stop fleeing from the voice within you that's been waiting to be heard. And how does awakening begin? Not with grand changes, but in small moments that you truly notice. When you take that first sip of coffee and actually taste it. When you sit in the park and watch the light on the leaves instead of scrolling your phone. When, in conversation, you don't respond right away, but take a moment to feel what was really said. These are not escapes from reality. They are return points to yourself. Heidegger once said, "The authentic is that in which a person truly dwells with themselves." And Albert Schweitzer wrote, "Happiness is the only thing that doubles when shared, but it begins with presence in the moment." You don't have to change everything. You just have to be right where you are, with whatever you feel, even if it's sadness, even if it's emptiness. That is true presence, not looking away, not numbing yourself, but breathing and saying, "I am here." Meister Eckhart said, "The more you let go, the more you are." And perhaps that is the key. Not to hold on, not to control, but to allow, to simply be, to feel, to rediscover yourself, not as a function, but as a human being. And now, as you begin, slowly, quietly, to stop fighting and start listening, something begins to open. Something real. Something yours. Something that's been waiting for you all along. Maybe being tired is not a weakness. Maybe it's a form of strength. The strength to stop lying to yourself. Because only those who are tired have carried much, have given much, have stayed silent too often when the heart longed to speak. Maybe your tiredness isn't the end. Maybe it's the beginning. A quiet invitation to find your way back to yourself. Not through action, not through achievement, but through stillness. A person who returns to themselves doesn't always shine brightly, but they shine truly, quietly, and deeply. And maybe now is the time to stop merely functioning, to stop merely enduring, and to start listening to what's been calling from within for so long. Maybe it's time not just to carry on, but to wake up. Not with a crash, but with a clear, quiet yes to that which you truly are. Your longing, before it learned to adapt. Your depth, before it was drowned out. Your being, the kind that needs no explanation.